The twin suns of Valaris Prime rose slowly over a city of silver towers and floating gardens. The light reflected across crystal domes and wide marble bridges, giving the capital a glow that seemed almost alive. It was a world of beauty and peace. Now, but its peace had been bought with blood years ago during the Coalition War. High above the city, inside the royal palace, stood Lyra ten Voss, heiress of the Valari Empire. Her long silver hair shimmered in the sunlight that came through tall glass windows. Around her, servants and advisors spoke softly about preparations for her ascension ceremony, the day she would finally become empress. But Lyra's thoughts were not on her future. They were trapped in her past. As the servants adjusted her ceremonial robe, her gaze drifted toward the far horizon, where blue skies faded into the stars. Somewhere out there was a single question that had haunted her for years. Why did he leave? He. Captain Ethan Ward, human commander of the starship Resolute. Lyra remembered the first time she saw him. A quiet human soldier standing in a hall full of Valari generals. He was so plain, so simple, that most nobles had ignored him. But when war reached its darkest hour, that same man had saved her life, her planet, and her people. And then, after victory, he vanished. The palace doors opened. Counselor Heiress, her most trusted advisor, entered with a respectful bow. "Your Highness, the council requests your attention. The preparations are almost complete." Lyra nodded slightly but did not move. "Heiress," she said softly, "have you ever wondered what became of Captain Ward?" The counselor blinked. "The human? It has been 8 cycles, my lady. Surely he returned to his world." "Yes," she said. "He returned without saying goodbye." Heiress hesitated. "Forgive me, Highness, but humans are unpredictable. Perhaps he did not wish to trouble you." Lyra smiled faintly, though it did not reach her eyes. "No. Ethan Ward was many things, but not careless. There was a reason he left. And I intend to find it." The counselor's brow furrowed. "You wish to contact him?" "I do," Lyra said firmly. "Send a diplomatic envoy to Earth. Tell them it is a personal request from the heiress of Valaris Prime. I will speak with him myself." Heiress hesitated again but bowed. "As you command, my lady." That night, as stars filled the skies above the royal gardens, Lyra stood alone near the reflecting pool. The gentle hum of energy fields and the sweet scent of glowing flowers surrounded her, yet her mind was far away. She remembered the war, the screams of her soldiers, the burning skies, the day her world almost fell. She had been trapped in a bunker beneath the capital. Enemy ships had already broken through the outer defense grid. Her guards had fallen. She had accepted death. Then came the humans. A fleet of rugged, battered human warships had jumped into the system. They were not graceful like Valari vessels. They were ugly, dark, and dented. But they fought like demons. They turned the tide of battle in a single day. And leading them was Captain Ethan Ward. He did not speak much. He did not boast. But every order he gave saved lives. Every action he took inspired courage. When she was finally rescued, she saw him for the first time, covered in burns, holding the line while his crew dragged civilians to safety. He saluted her quietly, said, "You're safe now, ma'am," and returned to battle. Lyra had never forgotten that moment. Now, years later, she whispered to the night, "Why did you leave without a word, Ethan Ward? Did I not matter? Did my people not matter?" The stars gave no answer. Meanwhile, far away, on a small green planet called Earth, the same message was being transmitted through official channels. Inside a quiet house near the coastal plains of New Zealand, Captain Ethan Ward was tending to his small garden when the holographic communicator beeped. He wiped his hands on his old uniform trousers and activated the message. The seal of the Valari Empire appeared, glowing blue. Then came the voice, smooth, regal, unmistakable. "Captain Ethan Ward of Earth. I am Lyra ten Voss, heiress of Valaris Prime. Years ago you saved my world. Then you vanished. I wish to know why. As Empress-to-be, I request your presence on Valaris. Please come. The message ended with her signature, a silver crest shining in the light. Ethan stood silently for a long time, staring at the hologram. He hadn't heard her voice in almost a decade. His neighbor, an older man named Tom, walked by and noticed him. "You all right, Ethan? You look like you've seen a ghost." Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe I have." Tom laughed. "Who's calling? You this time, the president?" "No," Ethan said, switching off the hologram. "An old friend, from a long way off." Tom tilted his head. "You gonna answer?" Ethan looked toward the horizon, where the evening sun touched the sea. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think it's time." Back on Valaris Prime, Lyra received the confirmation 2 days later. The human had accepted her invitation. Her heart raced when she read the words. She didn't know what she expected to feel, anger, curiosity, or perhaps joy. But she only felt nervous. For years, she had told herself she only wanted closure, to understand. But deep down she knew there was something else, something she had buried since the war. Heiress noticed her distant gaze. "You seem troubled, my lady." "I am fine," she said quickly. Then after a pause, "Do you believe in destiny, Heiress?" The counselor smiled. "Destiny, my lady, is merely the name we give to the things we do not understand." Lyra nodded slowly. "Then perhaps I am about to understand something." The day of Ethan Ward's arrival came. The spaceport near the capital was filled with banners, diplomats, and curious citizens. Humans were rare visitors now. The war was long over, and contact between Earth and Valaris had grown quiet. When his shuttle landed, the crowd murmured. The hatch opened, and Ethan stepped out. He was older now, his once dark hair showing hints of gray, his uniform simple and worn. But his eyes, calm, steady, human, were the same. Lyra walked forward with royal grace. Her golden cloak flowed behind her as she approached him. "Captain Ethan Ward," she said formally. "Welcome to Valaris Prime." Ethan bowed slightly. "Thank you, Your Highness, it's been a long time." Their eyes met, and in that single moment years of silence filled the space between them. She wanted to ask 1,000 things, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she turned and said, "Come. You must be tired from your journey. The palace is ready to receive you." Ethan followed her through shining corridors lined with murals of the war. His footsteps echoed softly on polished floors. Everywhere they went, Valari nobles whispered, curious about the plain human walking beside their heiress. That evening, after the welcoming ceremony, Lyra dismissed her attendants and met Ethan alone in the royal garden. The stars reflected on the water. The air was calm. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Lyra turned to him and said quietly, "I sent for you because there's something I need to understand." Ethan looked at her calmly. "You want to know why I left?" "Yes." Her voice trembled slightly. "You saved my people, Captain. You saved me. Then you vanished without saying goodbye. I searched for you for years." Ethan's gaze softened. "I didn't think you'd still remember." "I could never forget," she said. "Not after what you did." "So tell me, Ethan, why did you leave?" Ethan was silent for a long time. The night wind stirred the leaves around them. Finally, he said quietly, "Because it was the right thing to do." Lyra frowned. "The right thing? To disappear?" He looked at the stars. "You'll understand someday." Her heart tightened. "Then make me understand." He met her eyes, calm, unreadable, yet filled with something deep and unspoken. "Because my presence was making you weaker." The words struck her like a blow. She froze, unable to speak. Before she could ask what he meant, he turned slightly toward the stars again, his expression distant. "Good night, Your Highness," he said softly, and walked away. Lyra stood alone by the water. the reflection of the stars trembling beneath her feet. His words echoed in her mind, making you weaker. What did he mean? Why would saving her make her weaker? As the night deepened, she looked up at the endless sky, her heart filled with new questions. Morning came to Heiress Prime with soft golden light spilling over the palace gardens. The city below sparkled like liquid glass, filled with the sounds of early trade and laughter. But inside the royal palace there was silence, the kind of silence that comes when two people have said something they don't yet understand. Lyra Ten Voss sat by her balcony, eyes lost in the horizon. She hadn't slept. The words of Captain Ethan Ward still echoed in her mind. Because my presence was making you weaker. She turned the sentence over and over, trying to find its meaning. Ethan Ward, the quiet, humble human who had once led fleets into battle, had refused to explain. He had simply said those words and walked away. Now he was staying as her guest, and the whole palace buzzed with gossip. Why does he act so cold? Shouldn't he be honored? He saved us once. Perhaps he demands more recognition. Lyra ignored their whispers. She knew Ethan wasn't a man of greed or vanity. There was something deeper behind his silence, and she intended to uncover it. That morning, she went to the palace garden where Ethan was sitting under a tree. He wasn't wearing his uniform, just a simple gray shirt and worn trousers. In his hands was a datapad filled with notes about the Valari restoration programs. When he noticed her, he stood politely. "Your Highness," she gestured for him to sit. "No need for formality, Captain." He gave a small smile. "Old habits die hard." She sat across from him. "You've seen the city again. What do you think of Valaris now?" Ethan looked around, taking in the beauty of the floating gardens, the clear streams, and the rebuilt towers. "It's peaceful. You've done well rebuilding." Lyra's eyes softened. "We tried. But I think you misunderstand. You were the one who made this possible. Without you, there would be no peace." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked down at the datapad and said quietly, "That's not true. Your people did this. I only gave you time." Lyra leaned forward. "You risked everything for us. You lost soldiers, friends, ships. Why do you speak as if you did nothing?" Ethan's gaze remained calm. "Because I did what any human would have done." His tone was so simple, so honest, that it made her pause. Lyra studied him carefully. "You humans, you're strange. You never ask for rewards. You never claim power. Even when victory is yours, you walk away." "Why?" He smiled faintly. "Because power isn't the goal. Survival is. Freedom is. We help because we remember what it's like to be helpless." Lyra frowned slightly. "Helpless?" Ethan nodded. "Long ago, Earth wasn't the shining world you see in your records. We fought wars, lost billions, destroyed our own home many times. We learned pain. Maybe that's why we can't stand to see others fall the same way." Lyra was silent. She could hear truth in his words, a quiet, ancient sadness behind them. Later that day, the royal council summoned Ethan for a formal meeting. Lyra sat at the head of the table, surrounded by high-ranking nobles and ministers. "Captain Ward," one of the older nobles began, "we are honored by your presence. Valaris owes much to humanity's bravery." Ethan nodded politely. "It was a shared fight." Another noble leaned forward. "Our archives show that after the war you refused the council's gifts. Lands, wealth, even citizenship." "Why?" Ethan smiled slightly. "Because it wasn't mine to take." Murmurs spread through the room. The nobles were clearly confused. One of them said, "You could have been part of our royal line." Some even suggested marriage into the Voss family. Lyra felt her cheeks warm, but she remained composed. Ethan only shook his head. "That wouldn't have been right." "Not right?" The noble scoffed. "You saved our entire civilization." Ethan met his gaze calmly. "Saving lives doesn't give me the right to own them." The room went silent. Even Lyra's breath caught. Ethan continued softly, "Humans help because it's the right thing to do. We don't stay to be thanked. We leave so that others can find their strength again." Lyra stared at him, realization beginning to form. A faint light of understanding, but still distant. That evening, after the council meeting, Lyra found herself walking through the palace halls alone. She ended up in the old war gallery, where holograms of the conflict were kept, memories of dark days. She stopped before one of them, an image of Ethan Ward standing on the deck of his ship, giving orders as fire rained from the sky. He looked exhausted in the image, eyes shadowed, uniform torn, yet there was determination in every line of his face. Lyra whispered, "You carried us through the storm, and now you tell me I was weaker because of it?" "Because you were," came a quiet voice behind her. She turned. Ethan was standing at the doorway watching her. "How long have you been there?" she asked. "Long enough," he said gently, stepping closer. "You wanted to know why I left. You're starting to see it." Lyra crossed her arms. "No, I'm not." "You talk in riddles, Ethan. How could saving my world make it weaker?" Ethan sighed, leaning against a nearby pillar. "Do you know what happened after the war, Lyra? Do you know what your council proposed?" "Yes," she said. "They wanted to rebuild, to strengthen our borders. And to let humans lead your reconstruction," Ethan interrupted. "They wanted us to take command, to train your armies, to govern your systems, and to rule for you." Lyra blinked in shock. "That can't be true." "It was," Ethan said quietly. "They said it was out of gratitude. But I saw something else. I saw fear. They didn't want to take responsibility anymore. They wanted humans to carry it for them." Lyra's expression softened with disbelief. "And you thought leaving would fix that?" He looked at her with calm eyes. "It did. The moment we left, you were forced to lead again. You had to rise. And you did." She took a step closer, voice low. "You mean to tell me you left? For our sake?" Ethan nodded. "Humans fight, but not to rule. We fight so others can stand. That's all." Lyra was silent for a long moment. She felt her heart twist, not in sadness, but in something else she couldn't name. Finally, she whispered, "You could have told me." Ethan's eyes softened. "Would you have understood then?" Her silence was his answer. The next few days passed quietly. Ethan continued to meet with Valari engineers, helping them improve disaster relief systems. He never boasted, never gave orders. He only guided, then stepped back to let others finish the work. Lyra watched him from afar, fascinated. Every decision he made, every word he spoke seemed to carry a quiet strength. He never demanded loyalty or obedience. He simply inspired it, and slowly she began to understand. Humans didn't conquer. They reminded others how to stand again. Still, one question remained in her heart, one that kept her awake each night. If Ethan had left for their sake, why had he left her without a word? One evening, Lyra found him again in the garden, working on a broken drone. He had taken off his gloves, his hands marked with old scars. She watched for a moment before saying softly, "You never stop fixing things, do you?" He looked up, smiling faintly. "Old habit." She walked closer. "You fixed my world once, but you broke my peace when you left." He froze for a second, then put the drone down gently. "I didn't mean to." "Then why didn't you say goodbye?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "You saved me, Ethan. I thought you were my friend." Ethan's expression softened. I still am." "Then why?" "Because I couldn't stay," he said firmly. "Because if I had, I would have become part of something I shouldn't. You were becoming dependent on me, and I couldn't let that happen." Lyra looked at him with shining eyes. "Dependent? Or close?" He hesitated. His gaze flickered for a moment, pain, memory, and something unspoken. Finally, he said softly, "Some bonds are better left untouched. You had a destiny waiting. I would have only stood in the way." The air between them grew still. Neither spoke for a long time. Then Lyra said, her voice low, "You think too little of yourself, Captain Ward. And you think too much of me," he replied with a faint smile. She turned away, hiding the emotion in her eyes. "You humans," she whispered. "You make everything so complicated." He chuckled quietly. "We're not complicated, Lyra. We're just human." That night, as Ethan walked back to his quarters, Lyra watched him from her balcony. The human who had once commanded fleets now walked like a simple man. No guards, no pride, no arrogance. Just calm, steady purpose. She finally began to understand what made humans different. It wasn't their power. It was their restraint. They didn't stay to rule. They left so others could rise. The sky over Valaris Prime was painted gold and violet when the royal shuttles crossed above the capital. From her balcony, Lyra Ten Voss watched the slow movement of the ships, her thoughts far from the beauty around her. Captain Ethan Ward's words still echoed inside her heart. We fight so others can stand. That's all. He had said it so simply as if it were nothing. But to her it was everything. Lyra had grown up among nobles who spoke in riddles and pride, who built their lives on power and titles. But this quiet human carried no crown, no wealth, no ambition, only purpose, and for reasons she could not explain. That purpose both inspired and unsettled her. In the days that followed, Lyra noticed something strange. Ethan had become popular among the palace workers. The engineers liked him because he helped repair their systems without asking for credit. The guards respected him because he treated them as equals. Even the royal children followed him around, asking about Earth and its blue oceans. But among the nobles, whispers began to grow. Why is he still here? He's influencing the Heiress. Humans always say they don't want power until they have it. Lyra ignored the rumors, but she knew how fast gossip could poison the court. The Villari had always been proud, and their pride still feared human humility. Still, she refused to dismiss Ethan. There were truths hidden behind his silence, and she intended to find them. One evening, she visited the royal archives, a great circular hall filled with glowing data crystals. Only members of the royal line could enter without permission. She had one goal: to find the records of the post-war council meetings, the ones Ethan had mentioned. The hall was silent except for the faint hum of the machines. Lyra inserted her authorization code and began scrolling through old files. Hours passed. The room dimmed as night fell outside. Then she found it, a meeting transcript labeled Council of Reconstruction, Cycle 472. She tapped the crystal, and the holographic text unfolded in the air. Her eyes moved quickly, reading each line. Proposal 17, Transfer of Temporary Authority to Human Command for Stabilization. Vote results, 8 in favor, 2 against. Lyra froze. It was true. The council had planned to let humans rule Heiress, not just assist but govern. Another section made her heart tighten. Captain Ward declined the proposal. He refused command and insisted Villari leadership resume responsibility immediately. He cited risk of cultural dependency and loss of sovereignty. She scrolled further and found his words recorded in the transcript. If we stay, they'll lean on us. They won't stand on their own. Let them rise by their own strength. That's how peace lasts. Lyra's breath caught. She could almost hear his voice in those lines. Calm, steady, selfless. She whispered to the empty room. You didn't leave to abandon us. You left to save us from ourselves. Her heart ached. She had misunderstood him all these years. The next morning, Lyra found Ethan in the training yard working with a group of young soldiers. He was teaching them human-style rescue drills, simple, efficient, and focused on teamwork. The soldiers laughed as they tried his methods, failing at first, then cheering when they succeeded. Ethan clapped one of them on the shoulder. Good, remember, your goal isn't glory. It's getting everyone home. Lyra waited until the session ended, then approached him. You knew, she said quietly. He looked at her. Knew what? That the council wanted to hand control to you. You stopped them. Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. So you found the records. I had to, she said. You could have told me. I didn't want to humiliate your people, he replied gently. You'd just survived a war. You needed hope, not shame. She shook her head. You took the burden alone. That's what leaders do, he said simply. You're not our leader, Ethan. He smiled faintly. Exactly. For a long moment they stood in silence. Around them, the morning sun lit the training field in warm light. Finally, Lyra said softly, You could have accepted everything. Land, power, even me. Ethan's smile faded. That's why I couldn't, her voice trembled. Because of me? He didn't answer at first. His eyes were calm but sad. If I'd stayed, Lyra, they would have said I stayed for the Heiress. Not for the cause. That would have made everything I fought for meaningless. Lyra's throat tightened. She looked away, pretending to watch the soldiers. You always think of duty before yourself. It's the only way peace survives, he said quietly. That afternoon, Lyra met with her counselor Heiress, who noticed her troubled expression. You've learned something, he guessed. I've learned everything, she said softly. And I feel like a fool, Heiress tilted his head. Because you misjudged the human? Because I misjudged what it means to be strong, she replied. I thought strength was power. I see now that real strength is restraint. The counselor nodded slowly. Perhaps that is why humans are both feared and admired. Lyra looked at him with tired eyes. He carries the weight of his choices quietly. And she paused, her voice trembling. I treated his silence like betrayal, Heiress bowed. Then perhaps it is time to tell him that. That evening, Lyra went to Ethan's quarters. The door was open. He was standing by the window staring at the city lights. Beautiful view, he said without turning. Not as beautiful as understanding, she said softly. He looked over his shoulder, half smiling. You've been thinking. Yes, she said, stepping inside. And I owe you an apology. For what? For not understanding why you left. For thinking you were cold. Ethan shook his head. You don't need to apologize. I do, she insisted. You carried the burden of my people's pride alone. You could have ruled us, but instead you trusted us to rise. You believed in us more than we believed in ourselves. He looked away. It wasn't easy. I had to walk away from people I cared about. Lyra took a deep breath. Including me? He didn't answer for a long time. Then he said softly, especially you. Her heart skipped. Why? Ethan's voice was calm but heavy. Because if I'd stayed, I wouldn't have been your savior anymore. I would have become your weakness. Lyra felt tears gather in her eyes. You think caring makes us weak? No, he said gently. But depending does. And I couldn't be the reason an empress doubted her own strength. Her tears slipped down silently. You're cruel, Ethan Ward. He smiled faintly. I'm human. Outside, the night winds carried the scent of flowers and rain. Lyra stepped closer until she stood beside him at the window. You left to protect me, she said. But you hurt me all the same. I know, he said quietly. Sometimes doing the right thing still hurts. They stood in silence, watching the stars. Two people from different worlds. Bound by choices neither could undo. Finally, Lyra whispered, You said humans fight so others can stand. But who helps you stand, Ethan? He gave a small smile. We help each other. That's what being human means. She looked at him. Truly looked. The tired lines on his face, the quiet strength in his eyes, the sadness he carried like a shadow. And for the first time, she saw not a soldier or a hero, but a man who had given too much and asked for nothing. The next day, the council met again, this time without Lyra's invitation. They were angry. Your Highness, one shouted, the human has too much influence. He questions our traditions, another added. His presence divides the court. Lyra raised a hand, silencing them. Captain Ward has done nothing but serve this world with honor. Then why does he stay? A minister demanded. What is his true purpose here? Lyra's eyes were calm but sharp. Perhaps to remind us of who we were, and who we must become. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. After the meeting, Lyra found Ethan preparing to leave the palace grounds. You're leaving again, she said softly. He nodded. It's time. I've done all I can here. Her heart sank. And what if I ask you to stay? He met her gaze. Then I'd have to refuse again. Why? She whispered. Because if I stay, you'll stop believing in your own strength, and you have a galaxy to lead. Lyra's eyes glistened. You silence me with your truth, Ethan Ward, every time. He smiled faintly. Then I've done my job. That night after he was gone, Lyra stood on her balcony once more. The stars shimmered like tears in the sky. She whispered to the darkness. You left again, just like before. But this time I understand. She placed her hand over her heart. You taught me what it means to lead, and not by power, but by compassion. Below, the city lights of Heiress burned bright, strong, alive and free. And though he was gone, she could still hear his voice in the wind. We don't help to be worshipped. We help so others can stand again. Lyra closed her eyes and smiled through her tears. The truth had finally set her free. The grand halls of Heiress Prime were filled with whispers. News had spread like wildfire. The human had returned. The one who once saved their world was here again, and the Empire could not stop talking about it. But not all the voices were kind. Behind the polished walls of crystal and silver, The noble council gathered, their eyes cold and sharp. This human, one counselor hissed, has turned the heiress against her advisors. He clouds her mind with his earth philosophies, said another, his tone dripping with venom. Valaris must stand proud, not bow to human humility. Only Lyra ten Voss, the heiress herself, sat calm at the center of the chamber. Her blue eyes, once filled with doubt, now glowed with a quiet fire. She listened to their arguments, but said nothing yet. Ethan Ward stood near the door, silent as ever. His posture was relaxed, yet his eyes scanned the room carefully. He had no interest in Valari politics, only in keeping his word. He had promised to come when summoned. He had promised to answer her questions. Nothing more, but he could see the growing storm in the court, and he knew it would soon hit Lyra directly. Later, in her private chambers, Lyra faced Ethan. She stood by the window, looking out at the endless skyline of her city, silver towers under two suns. Her hands were clasped tightly behind her back. You heard them, she said quietly. They think you've come to control me. Ethan shook his head. I didn't come to control anyone, Lyra. You called and I came. That's all. But they won't see it that way, she replied bitterly. To them, you're a human commander, a strategist who shaped battles and won wars. Your power, and power scares people, Ethan said softly. She turned toward him, frustration flashing in her eyes. Then why stay? Why not leave before they make you their enemy again? Ethan's voice remained calm. Because I won't run from truth. You asked for answers and truth shouldn't hide. Lyra sighed, her anger fading into exhaustion. You're strange, Ethan Ward. You never take advantage, never demand reward. You act as if none of this matters to you. He gave a faint smile. Because it doesn't. I'm not here for your throne or your titles. I'm here because once a frightened heiress asked a soldier why he risked his life for strangers. Lyra looked down, her voice trembling. And you never answered then either. Ethan's gaze softened. Because you weren't ready to understand. The next morning, chaos broke out in the capital. A rival noble faction accused Lyra of betraying Valaris traditions by allowing a human to influence imperial decisions. Protests erupted outside the palace gates, flags burned. Voices shouted. The message was clear. Send the human away. Inside the palace, Ethan watched the uproar from a balcony. He could see the same pattern he had seen across galaxies. Fear of change. Pride mixed with insecurity. He understood it too well. He turned to Lyra's aide, a young alien named Nerith. If this continues, she'll lose control of her council. She won't, Nerith said firmly. She believes in you. Ethan's expression darkened. That's the problem. That evening, Ethan made his choice. He packed his few belongings, a small bag, a communicator, a picture of his Earth unit from long ago, and walked to the docking bay. The starport lights shimmered against the glass floor. Ships rose and fell like silent comets. He didn't notice Lyra until she spoke. So you're leaving again? She said from behind him. Her voice was soft, almost broken. He turned around. She was wearing a simple white robe, far from her royal attire. Her crown was gone. Her hair was loose. She looked human. Ethan nodded slowly. If I stay, it'll only make things worse for you. Her lips trembled. You think I care about their whispers? I think you care about your people, Ethan replied. And they need their leader, not her shadow following a human. Lyra stepped closer. You're not my shadow. You're my reminder. Of what? Of what strength really looks like, she said. You fought without hate, you led without pride. My people worship power, but you taught me that power without heart means nothing. Ethan looked down at the floor. You learned that yourself, Lyra. You don't need me anymore. But I want you here, she whispered. You changed me. Ethan exhaled slowly. Then let that change guide you. Don't let it chain you. She clenched her fists, tears threatening to fall. You always speak like that, calm, quiet, final. Do you ever let anyone in? He met her gaze, his voice soft but steady. Once during a war on a cold world. I let in a princess who didn't see herself as a leader yet. Lyra's eyes widened, her heart pounding. But she found her strength, Ethan continued. And when she did, the soldier had to step away. Because if he stayed, she'd never see how bright she could truly shine. For a long time, neither spoke. Only the hum of engines filled the air. Then Lyra said quietly, You really believe humans shouldn't lead others, don't you? Ethan nodded. We're not made to rule the stars. We're made to remind others how to stand. That's enough, her voice cracked. And that's why you left before? Yes. Silence fell again. Lyra stepped closer until she was standing just a few feet away. Her voice was low, trembling. Then answer me one last time, Ethan Ward. Why do you care so much if you never stay? Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and then finally answered, his words slow and honest. Because caring doesn't need reward. Because we humans, we love the fight to make things better, even when no one remembers our names after. Lyra's eyes glistened. His reply hit her deeper than she expected. She tried to speak but couldn't. No royal words could form. Her voice, her logic, her titles, all fell silent. He turned toward the ship ramp. Take care of them, Lyra 10. You have what it takes now. She reached out as if to stop him, but her hand froze midair. She knew she couldn't. The door closed, the engines lit, and the ship lifted into the endless dark. Days passed. Then weeks without Ethan, the Council's rebellion grew louder. But Lyra faced them head-on. She no longer needed anyone to speak for her. When they accused her of being too human, she smiled proudly. Yes, she said. Because humanity taught me what leadership truly means, and to serve, not command. Her courage silenced the room. Soon, even her rivals began to respect her strength. The Empire slowly united again. Valaris Prime changed. Not through conquest. Not through war, but through quiet human ideals carried in one woman's heart. One night, Lyra stood alone on her balcony, the twin moons high above. She looked at the stars and whispered softly, You were wrong, Ethan Ward. You didn't make us weaker. You made us whole. Her words vanished into the night, carried away by the soft wind. Somewhere light years away, a lone human ship drifted through the dark. Inside, Ethan sat quietly by a viewport, gazing at the same stars. He didn't hear her words, but somehow he smiled, as if he did. The capital of Valaris Prime sparkled under the light of its twin suns. From the high towers of the royal palace, the city looked peaceful, prosperous, and alive. Markets bustled, citizens laughed, and diplomats spoke quietly in the streets, all under the careful guidance of Lyra 10 Voss, the heiress who had become empress. She stood on her balcony, gazing at the horizon. A gentle breeze brushed her hair across her face, carrying the scent of floating gardens below. In her hand, she held a small communicator, the device she had never expected to use again. It was Earth. Weeks after Ethan Ward's departure, Lyra had focused entirely on her empire. The council had accepted her leadership. The nobles who opposed her had either changed sides or grown silent, and her people thrived. Yet, despite her accomplishments, a quiet emptiness lingered in her heart. She had learned much from Ethan, about humility, restraint, and quiet strength. But there remained a part of her that longed for closure, a part that still wanted to hear from the human who had changed her life so profoundly. Finally, she made a choice. Sitting in the palace study, surrounded by glowing crystals that projected records of the Empire, Lyra typed a message. Her fingers trembled slightly as she wrote, Captain Ethan Ward, I have finally understood why you left. I have learned what it means to lead with heart. Thank you for teaching me. I hope you are well. Lyra 10 Voss, Empress of Valaris Prime. She paused. She had spent years imagining what she would say, fearing his silence, fearing rejection. But the words felt honest, and for the first time, she felt free. She pressed send far across the galaxy. On a quiet blue and green world called Earth, Ethan Ward sat in his small home overlooking the sea. His garden bloomed with wildflowers, his hands still marked from years of work and old battles. He had returned here after leaving Valaris Prime, living simply, quietly, the way he always intended. The communicator beeped. He raised an eyebrow, recognizing the sender immediately. The message was from Valaris Prime, from Lyra 10 Voss. Ethan read her words carefully. He leaned back in his chair, silent for a long moment. Her message was short, simple, but filled with honesty and respect. A faint smile spread across his face. He whispered quietly to himself, Good, that's all I ever wanted. Back on Valaris, Empress Lyra returned to her daily duties. She met with diplomats, resolved disputes, and oversaw trade agreements. Every decision she made carried a weight that once would have crushed her. But now, after Ethan's lessons, she faced them with calm authority. Yet sometimes, in quiet moments, she would look at the stars and imagine him somewhere out there, living simply observing the galaxy from afar. She didn't need him by her side anymore. She didn't even expect a reply. But somehow, imagining his calm presence gave her peace. Months passed. Valaris Prime flourished under her leadership. Cities grew, technologies advanced, and alliances strengthened. The Empire's reputation as a fair and strong civilization spread across the stars. Lyra would occasionally stand in the palace garden at night, watching the twin moons rise. She reflected on the lessons of the past, the war, the council, the human who had risked everything for her world, and the quiet way he had chosen to leave. It had been a test of patience, of understanding, of true leadership. One evening, as the moons rose high and painted the gardens in silver light, a thought came to her. She realized that humans had a gift, not of technology or weapons, but of perspective. They could see what others could not. She remembered Ethan's words. "We don't help to be worshipped. We help so others can stand again." And she finally understood. True leadership wasn't about recognition or power. It was about trust, humility, and the courage to step aside when necessary. She smiled quietly. Meanwhile, on Earth, Ethan lived his life with the same quiet dignity he always had. He continued tending to his garden, reading old logs from his fleet, and occasionally speaking to young recruits who sought his guidance. Then one morning, he received a brief, simple update from a Valari diplomat. Nothing formal, nothing ceremonial, just a report. "The Empress has stabilized the Council. Valaris Prime thrives. Your guidance, though absent, remains honored." Ethan allowed himself a faint smile. The galaxy continued to spin, and human lessons continued to echo silently. No fanfare, no recognition. Just quiet, effective change, that was enough. Back on Valaris, Empress Lyra continued to lead, and yet she sometimes caught herself speaking to the stars, whispering into the night, "Thank you, Ethan, for everything." She didn't expect a reply. She didn't need one. The lesson had been received, the message understood. Still, deep inside, she hoped that somewhere, he knew she had learned to lead with both strength and compassion, the way he had wanted her to. Weeks later, during a ceremonial event in the palace, Lyra paused at the balcony overlooking her people. Soldiers marched in disciplined lines. Children laughed and played along the avenues. Citizens waved their banners proudly. She felt a profound sense of peace. This was her world, her responsibility, and she was ready to guide it. And in that moment, she understood something more. The greatest gift humans could give wasn't protection or power. It was belief that others could rise on their own, stronger than before. Her heart whispered a silent promise she would never forget. On a quiet evening on Earth, Ethan gazed at the stars, imagining the world he had helped protect from afar. He knew Lyra was leading her empire with strength and grace. He could see it in the reports, in the small updates from diplomats, in the galaxy itself. He smiled faintly, feeling the quiet satisfaction that only humans could understand. He had done his duty. He had helped her stand, and now he could finally rest. Somewhere across the void, a human and an alien shared the same stars, separated by light years, yet united by respect, trust, and lessons that transcended worlds. The galaxy moved on. Wars were forgotten, heroes faded from memory, but the truth remained. Humans did not seek glory. They sought understanding, strength, and the chance to let others rise. And that truth, quiet, unassuming, and powerful, changed the universe forever. The message from Valaris Prime remained in Ethan's communicator. He never responded, and he never needed to. Silence, he knew, was sometimes the greatest reply.